So I'm using Adobe After Effects 2021, but you can use any version of After Effects. Even free trial version works fine. First of all, let's see what we have. Here we can change our layout. So basically, if I'm gonna press on standard, you can see that we have some different kind of layout. I'm gonna set mine to standard, and in case if you wouldn't see some of these panels, you can always enable it from here from window. For example, character, as you can see, checkbox, it's set, so we have character panel. You can even close some panels with the right click and close panel, or add a new panel. For example, you can go to window, enable brushes, and you can see our brushes. Let's close it for now. So in this way, if you cannot see some of the panels which you can see on my screen, you can always go to window and enable it from here. We can create our first new composition. We can create by clicking here or by clicking on this icon right here. Either way works fine. So let's click it here. I'll set my resolution to Full HD, 1920, and height 1080. Here we can set our frame rate. We are going to use 30 frames per second. And here we can change the duration. So basically how long this composition will go. Our animation will be up to 15 seconds. So I'm gonna set here 15 seconds. Here is milliseconds, here is seconds, here's minutes, and here's hours. Here you can change the background color. Default is black, so it's fine. So let's click OK. Here, by the way, we can change the name. Let's call it animation and click OK. So now you can see that we've created our composition, which is animation. Here is our timeline. So you can see that it goes from 0 seconds to 15 seconds. And by clicking on this time cursor and scrubbing through timeline, we will be able to check our composition. Also, we can press 0 on numpad, which also will play back our animation, or go frame by frame by clicking on these buttons in preview panel. Once again, if you cannot see preview panel, you can go to window and enable it from here, preview. So first thing which I want to do is to create a background. So we want to create a background because now if we will click on this alpha channel transparency grid, we can see that this grid represents that here is nothing is being created. So basically it's transparent and we want to have some color or solid for background. So to create a background we can use a shape layer or a simple solid. In our case we only will use shape layers. So let me quickly show you the difference between shape layers and solids. So for example we can go to layer new solid. Let's click here on make comp size, so it will be same as the size of our composition. And we can change the colors to white, for example, and click OK. So I'm gonna use this pen tool to draw some shape, like this. And if I'm gonna press S on keyboard, by the way, don't worry if I'm going too fast, I just want to explain what is different between solid and shape layers. I bring up the scale by pressing S on keyboard and change it from 100% to, for example, 600. And with this selection tool, I can move around and deselect. You can see that we don't have this crispy edge because solids works like this. You cannot go past 100% because it will lose quality. This is why we are going to use shape layers. So let's try to create a shape layer. I'm gonna delete this solid and we will create a random shape using pen tool. So to create shape layer, you need to make sure that you didn't select any of your layers. Because if you will have some layers here and you will select some of them, you will not create a shape layer, you will create a mask on that layer which you have. Exactly as I did with this solid which I had here. So to recap this moment, if I'm gonna select the solid and create using this pen tool a shape, it will create a mask on top of this solid. Let me press Ctrl Z a bunch of times to undo this moment. And if I'm gonna deselect any of these layers which you might have here and start creating, you can see that we created our shape layer. So let's delete the solid And let's see what is cool about shape layers. Select this shape layer, press S on keyboard to see scale. And now if I'm gonna increase my scale, as you can see, I went well above 100. And if I'm gonna move it with the selection tool, you can see that edge still stays perfectly sharp. And this is what is cool about shape layers. This is why in our animation we are going to use shape layers. So let me delete this shape layer and solids because we don't need them. In the next class we are going to create our background and the shape which we are going to animate. See you in the next video. Okay, now we know what is shape layer. So let's create a background. So for background we can use this rectangle tool. If you cannot see a rectangle tool, just left mouse click and hold, and you'll have this drop down menu. From here you can choose this rectangle tool. I'm still holding down my left mouse click and I'm going to select this rectangle tool. And here is a cool trick. If you left mouse double click on this icon, you will create a rectangle exact same size as your window here. So let's left double mouse click here. It created new rectangle. By the way, if for some reason you cannot create new rectangle with left double mouse click, you can just simply select it and draw a rectangle like this. It also works. In my case, I already created with left double mouse click. So now let's have a little overview what settings we have on our shape. First of all, we have these quick menus here for fill and stroke, but also you can just click here on this drop-down menu and go to rectangle, which we created, and you see also this stroke and fill, which we can see here. But also we will have transform options exactly for this shape. And by the way, these settings are just for this shape which we created. And what I mean by saying this is that you can create another shape. Just by selecting your shape layer, you can create another shape like this. And as you can see, it's created another rectangle. And you have the same settings as here for this new shape. But this is more kind of advanced technique, which we will come back later in this class. So for now, let's delete this rectangle. Just keep in mind that we can create a bunch of shape layers inside of one shape layer. But for start, we are going to start easy. So our first step is to create our background. We can click on this shape layer, press Enter on keyboard, and rename it. I'll call it background or just BG for background. So now, as you know, we have this fill and stroke options. You can get from here, which is much easier. Let's close it here for now and select our shape layer. And now we can adjust our fill and stroke. So as you can guess, stroke is this outline, which we don't want to have. We can click on this stroke, word stroke, and change it to none and click OK. In this way we can completely get rid of the stroke. And now we can click on this word fill and change the fill types. In my case, I want to use this radial gradient. As you can see, we have this none, solid color, linear gradient, and radial gradient. So let's click on it. Make sure that opacity is set to 100, so it would be visible and we would not have any transparency. And click OK. So now, as you can see, we created this gradient fill. We can change to this selection tool to be able to manipulate our gradient. For example, now if we will select our shape layer and then select gradient fill, you'll see this line, which allows us to spread our gradient. So if I'm gonna click here on this little handle and drag it to the right, and now we can change the colors of this gradient. We can click here to change the color, and here on these points we can change any of these colors. We can even add a new point by clicking here just below this line and add a new color. And now, as you can see, we have this white color and this black color and this blue color in between. In this way we can create any kind of patterns of our gradient. But for now I want to create a simple kind of gradient. So to remove some colors, you can just click and drag it down to delete, or just click and click delete. In this way we will have only 2 points of colors, and we can change this brighter one to like this darkish blue. So here you basically changing the color, and here we can change the brightness. And as you can see in my original example, I've used this kind of gradient. So let's also set it to this bluish and dark kind of color, just by changing this dot over here and brightness set to about here. And this black part we are not going to change because we want to have this kind of vignette darkening on the edge. And let's click OK. Now we can close it here. And by the way, at any point you can now select your background and change here from fill to any color which you want. And if you want to change your gradient, you can just open here, go to gradient fill and just spread it a bit more if you want to have your edge not so dark. And if you will scroll on the mouse with the wheel, you can zoom in and zoom out into your window and adjust this gradient as you like. I think it looks great. And in the next class, we are going to create our first circle and we are going to animate it. See you in the next video.